WCGO.com. Bill Ayers is a retired, and I'm gonna withdraw the word retired because you're still in the fight, man.
Well, I'm retired from the University of Illinois at Chicago,
Okay.
but I was a distinguised professor
You
there, which
are.
means that nobody told me what to do for the last 25 years, and I'm still doing what nobody tells me to do. So,
well, you just blew my whole intro because it's exactly what I was going to say. Senior university scholar at the University of Illinois Chicago. He's the author of "You Can't Fire the Bad Ones" and 18 other myths about teachers. Teachers unions and public education. That's by William Ayers, Crystal Laura, and Rick Ayers, and published by Beacon Press. I had a whole bunch of questions that I was going to ask you.
Well, I have a question just about what you just said right there. So that's a myth about you can't fire the bad ones. Because I'm just going to say, when I was watching the documentary Waiting for Superman, the one part of that movie that stood out the most with me was that room that they had for the teachers that are tenured but are on suspension. Did you see the documentary?
The rubber room.
Not only did I see it, but the New Yorker devoted an entire thick description of the rubber room in New York City.
Okay.
And the rubber room is where something like a dozen teachers who have been taken out of classrooms because of really egregious misbehavior are awaiting due process, which is part of not just a union contract, it's part of the law.
Of the rights. Right.
And there are a dozen of them, and they sit around and collect a paycheck waiting for adjudication. But the thing that's so mad about that, so crazy, is that's 0.00001% of the New York City teachers. So why you would devote a 4,000-word essay in the New Yorker and a segment in it's distorted. So here's the problem.
But it's their space to distort.
It is their space to distort. But the whole point of our book is that we take 18 myths. You can't fire the bad ones. The teachers' unions are ruining the schools. The arts are irrelevant, and we'll get to that because we got to get down to getting the test scores up. We take these myths and we dismantle them one by one. But first we set them up by saying, here's what you can read in the New Yorker, in the New York Times, on NPR. Pick up any newspaper, for example, and you'll hear that we need to get the lazy, incompetent teachers out of the classroom. As soon as I hear that, I too nod dully. What am I going to do? Say, leave the incompetent one there. My granddaughter's about to arrive. Everyone wants the lazy, incompetent teacher out of the classroom. The problem is, it's not the problem. So if I framed the issue, if I got to the microphone before that shady politician and I said every kid in an American classroom deserves an intellectually grounded, compassionate, caring, well-rested and well-paid teacher in the classroom, I'd win that argument. So it's the framing that we're objecting to. And we take the myths one by one and disprove them. Let me give you just one real quickly.
Please.
Okay. The teachers' unions are destroying education. They're just destroying it. Let's check that hypothesis. Look at the states where right-to-work laws exist. Look at the states that don't have teachers' unions. Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and so on. They are at the bottom in the favored metric that they approve of, which is standardized test scores. Those places are in the bottom. Massachusetts is in the top. They have everyone is in a union in Massachusetts. So the thesis must be wrong. The hypothesis is disproved. And that's true internationally as well. Canada and Norway, where everyone is in a teachers' unions, do better on those international tests, which I'm critical of, but which the corporate reformers favor. Well, so their hypothesis is wrong. We do that with 18 different things that you will read every day in an American newspaper, which we take to be, a frontal assault on the collective voice of teachers.
Wow.
Indeed. And I spent, I'm going to circle back to that because there was one question we just had the student walk out this week, and I wanted to ask you specifically about that. So, but these were the questions that I was going to start off with.
Why are you looking at me like that? Did I just throw a wrench into your works?
No, because I'm, these were meant to start this off as sort of a smart ass moment, like, why don't you want America to be great again?
Love that.
Bill Ayers, why do you hate God? When did America get on the special bus?
Why do you kick puppies?
If it wasn't for people like you, Vietnam would be the 51st state. Is it true that Megyn Kelly smells like wet earth and decay, bathed in Chanel? I was just going to be a smartass on all this stuff, but the question that I really wanted to get to with the student walkout this week, and my own high school out in Romeoville was guilty of this as well, and in part they pandered to a pro-gun group that showed up across the street as an intimidation effort. But we've seen, and it hasn't gotten very much press, but these little snippets here and there come out about students who are facing retribution by schools for walking out, either warnings that this is going to end up on your permanent record and you won't be able to get to the school that you wanted to go to, the college or university that you wanted to go to. Some of them are facing corporal punishment.
What?
Corporal punishment, paddling. I'd have to go back and look at that.
Georgia, Alabama
thing.
Really?
Yeah, I believe so. Expulsion. All these punishments to students across the country, which to me begs the answer. First of all, that's sort of like the suburban the suburban tactic that we see that Black people and Hispanic people in this country face, in which you're disenfranchised from the country by being thrown into jail for relatively minor or very minor or even inconsequential crimes, vandalism, shoplifting, minor drug possession, those kinds of things. They can never vote. They can never go out and get a job again or a decent job again. So it just creates these cycles of but given that retribution that's happening to students because of the walkout, not all of them, but enough that the message gets out there, what does that do for it feels like the Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton thing all felt like this, that when students stand up for themselves and want to make a statement or an impact in their future and their society, the nation that they're going to inherit, there are substantial barriers that are there to knock them down and dissuade them from seeking agency in their own voice. What is the legacy, or what is the damage or the danger to our nation in that kind of a reaction?
Well, I have two reactions to that, Bill. One is that I think that that this is typical of how power responds to dissidents. That is to say, you can go recently into something like the Occupy movement, or like Black Lives Matter, or like the Dreamers, or you can go way back into the deep history when I was a kid or before. But here's how power always responds. They ignore you, they ridicule you, they instruct you, then they beat you up, and then they lose, and then it repeats. And the fact is that these kids being disciplined, like I read that in one Chicago suburb, 1,000 kids are going to have to serve detention. And I got a big smile on my face, and I thought, yes, please don't throw me in the briar patch. I mean, in other words, it's the University of Robben Island in South Africa, the University of the Prison, is where activists really learn about activism. And so the reality is, these kids who, with the greatest humanitarian response to a horror in our society, have been ridiculed, lectured, told how to do it, told what to wear. And then you see these images of these kids at Parkland standing up, that young woman with such clarity and really speaking not only passionately,
but all across
intelligently,
the country.
and all across the country. And it spurred something, I think, hugely important. And when people are rising, and we are in a moment where a resistance, not the so-called resistance of the Democratic Party, there's actually a resistance on the ground. And it reminds me of, the days of the Fugitive Slave Act, for example, sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, sanctuary neighborhoods, sanctuary restaurants. What a wonderful moment we're living through, and yet also a harrowing moment. So these kids have learned so much in the last month about political action, about activism, about what happens to you when you step out of your lane and you speak up on your own behalf. I don't know if you saw Tucker Carlson berating a young person, just going on and saying, what right have you to have an opinion about my Second Amendment rights?
It's a bully
tactic. Are you kidding? Bullying and then disciplining.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, of course, it's misguided and it's wrong on the part of power. But I don't think that we can instruct power. What we can say is that the kids have been brilliant, straight ahead, courageous, and all we can do, I think, is salute them and get in solidarity with them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just and I thought you were the perfect person to talk about this. So let me ask you what you just said. Most people would say it's very leftist, it's very progressive, it's very liberal. We have on this station a lot of friends who are conservative
Mm-hmm.
and on the right. Why is what you just said as important to them as it is to liberals and conservatives?
Well, I think I don't completely always buy the left-right thing, and I'll tell you
Indeed,
why.
indeed.
I mean, I think that a lot of this is manufactured, and just like I think there's, speaking
Agreed.
of myths, there's the myth of the
Yeah.
60s, and I'm supposedly from the 60s. Actually, I'm as much from today as I am from 50 years ago. I mean, I'm living now, and I'm looking.
You got the
forward.
tats, you got the earring, brother.
I understand, but nobody that I knew in December 31st, 1969 said, "Oh no, it's almost over." The world moves on.
Yeah.
That's
and you
marketing.
move with it. Yeah.
That's marketing. We're living, and so living, looking forward. Whatever the so-called 60s was, it was prelude to what we're doing today. So, so the question of left-right, I don't always buy. In fact, I gave a talk at the University of Georgia a few years ago, and as I was beginning to speak, a group of Hell's Angels walked in and occupied the front row, wearing Tea Party patriot patches, and it was meant to intimidate me. But I gave my talk, and afterwards, the head of the Hell's Angels asked the first question at the microphone, and his question was, "I liked a lot of what you said. I was surprised, but I really feel like you're a big government guy." And I said, "I'm not a big government guy. I'm worried you're a big government guy." And he said, "I'm not a big government guy." I said, "Oh, good. Then let's agree to close the Pentagon." And he said, "Not the Pentagon." Okay, now we're having a real conversation about taxing and spending. Who do you want to tax? What do you want to spend it on? I want to tax the wealthy, and I want to spend it on education, healthcare, guarantees of income. Those are the kinds of things that I think that will make our society better. So honestly, I think in a real conversation, not a quick, soundbite conversation, but in a real conversation between myself and a group of conservatives, we can find a lot of common ground. And I think that what we get caught up in is the kind of soundbite culture and the kind of notion. But here's one other thing I would say to that, Bill, which is that there's always in every society a struggle between the me and the we. We're individuals and we have to look out for ourselves, but we're also part of a community, and none of us exists in splendid isolation. How do we reconcile that? Well, that's always a political struggle. For the last 4 decades, we've been moving in the direction of everything is about the individual. And you can see it in education, where we have Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education, who believes that it's all about individuals, and education is a product that you buy at the marketplace. So we each individually buy it. You see it in the debate about the Second Amendment. There is no such a thing as public safety. The only question is, do you have a gun to protect yourself? Those conversations become nuts when they go too far in one direction. So we need to find a way to say, yes, every human being is of induplicable value, of incalculable importance, and we are part of a group.